This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I'm delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, all that. Question. Do you believe in anthropogenic climate change? That is, do you believe that mankind is responsible for climate change? Do you believe that climate change is because of human activity? I assume you're saying no. Do you then believe the government can steer a hurricane? I mean, because Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't believe in man-made climate change, but she thinks they can manipulate the weather. Isn't that man-made climate change? Is she now going to become Greta Thunberg? I mean, you can't have it both ways, people. If the government's got the power to steer hurricanes, it's certainly got the power to warm the planet. Mankind has the power to warm the planet. It's just kind of wild. And I got to say, I'm beginning to believe there's got to be some Russian bots in this. And the reason I say this on social media, because I put up these screenshots of these people suddenly claiming that that it's the government has created Hurricane Milton and steered it to Florida to hurt Donald Trump's reelection effort. But by the way, notice it's always about Donald Trump, too. Everything is about Donald Trump. They're steering hurricanes to the southeast, to swing states and Florida, which isn't a swing state, to hurt Donald Trump. It's always about Donald Trump. The level of obsession with this man who lives in these people's heads, wow. And yet, so they reject man-made climate change, and then they're like, but the government can create a hurricane. Y'all have heard of cloud seeding. Cloud seeding, by the way, real thing. So they've seeded clouds, created a hurricane, and they're steering it to Florida, to the I-4 corridor, no what less, to hurt Donald Trump. Y'all, we got some crazy people out there. Do not succumb to the madness, please. Social media is making people mentally ill, and it's just kind of wild to see the crazy coming to life. And then I think that the Russian bots are feeding on it. Now we got to move on to other stuff. By the way, Charlie. I'm not taking phone calls on people who think the government can control the weather. Wrong show. I'm not sure what Alex Jones and Art Bell's phone numbers are. I think you got to call heaven to get Art Bell these days. But nonetheless, if you think the government can steer hurricanes across the ocean, I will find you the mental help support hotline. But that's not this program. We got to talk about Hamas. And we got to talk about Israel, because today is the 1-year anniversary. And I want to begin by talking indirectly about it, and I've said this before. I've talked about it before, and I think it needs to be said again on this 1-year anniversary of Hamas paragliding into Israel, killing over 1,200 Israelis and taking citizens. Do you know there are still 98 Israeli citizens hostage in Gaza, and close to a dozen of them are American citizens? I want to talk about anti-Semitism. And I realize if you're a longtime listener to the program, this is repetitious, but it needs to be said again. When Jesus of Nazareth, whether you believe he was God or not, it's a historic fact he was crucified. In the biblical accounts of Jesus of Nazareth's crucifixion, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, hands Jesus over to the Jews. But the Jews cannot execute Jesus. The Jews have no power to execute Jesus of Nazareth. So they have to give him back over to the Romans. And it's the Romans who execute Jesus. It's the Romans who torture him, and the Romans who nail him to the cross. And the soldiers crucified Jesus. They took his garments, they divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots to see whose it shall be." This was to fulfill the scripture, which said they divided my garments among them, and for my clothes they cast lots. So the soldiers did these things. What you're supposed to see here is that everybody was responsible. Everyone was responsible. It wasn't just the Jews. It was the Gentiles too. You fast forward past this, and the Jews had special privileges in the Roman Empire. The Jews were monotheistic. They worshiped their God, who they believed was the God of all things. They had special temples. They didn't have to make sacrifices through the emperor. All of these sorts of things. And the Romans understood that it was better to give the Jews permission to be devout in their religion in a way that no one else was allowed to be. Otherwise, they just all wind up being executed, and you don't want to exterminate this population. Christians in the early days of Christianity after the resurrection worshipped in the synagogues. They were treated as just a Jewish sect. After all, Jesus was Jewish. Over time, however, their views were deviated so much, and so many Jews were converting to Christianity, that the local Jewish leaders began to say, "Hey, these guys aren't us. This is something else. This isn't Judaism." And the local Jewish leaders would go to the local Roman leaders and push out the Christians. What the local Christian sinners then started doing was saying, "Well, you know what? You guys are the ones who killed Jesus. It's your fault." Fast forward to 300 AD, Constantine becomes the emperor of Rome. Christianity is on the rise. If you want to have access to the emperor, you have to be a Christian. And so all of these people who yesterday were sacrificing to Zeus and Jupiter are today claiming that they worship Jesus. It wasn't a change of heart. It was just a change of political reality. And the fall guy became the Jews because the Christians remembered, you guys threw us out of the synagogues and led to Christian persecution after the temple was destroyed. You guys went through persecution. We had your back. Then you betrayed us. Well, guess what? We're going to make you pay. And the Jews were treated as second-class citizens. After all, everyone was told they're the ones who killed Jesus, even though it was the Roman soldiers who crucified him. And anti-Semitism begins to fester in the West. By the Middle Ages, the local religious and political leaders decided, you know what, it is shameful for Christians to be lending money to one another. It's a sin. It's debt and interest, all these things. They're just, we shouldn't be doing it. So you know what we're going to do it? We're going to make the Jews do it. Jews, who cares what your scripture says about lending money? We're going to make you be the money lenders. After all, you gave Judas those coins, you can start giving us coins. And the Jews were forced, despite their religious convictions, to become the bankers. And guess what? They got really good at banking. Concurrent to all of this, no Christian wanted to be a court jester. None of them wanted to participate in entertainment. Entertainment was considered beneath society. No one wanted to be a thespian. Better be a lesbian than a thespian. And so you know what? They wanted entertainment, but they thought it was beneath them. It was sinful to do. So you know what? We're going to make the Jews act out in the plays. Guess what? They got really good at banking, and they got really good at entertainment. They were forced to do it despite their convictions and preferences. And they got really good at it. Fast forward to the 20th century. In Europe, the Jews control a lot of banking because back in the Middle Ages, they were forced to do it. And the families kept trading inside the families and growing, and they got wealthy. And Hitler needed somebody to blame. So he blamed those Jews and their control of the banking system. And he blamed those Jews, the propagandists who were acting in all the films, steering people, keeping you entertained in ways you shouldn't be. And anti-Semitism continued to fester. Anti-Semitism was a thing with the Romans because they didn't like the Jews worshiping this one God when everybody else knew that there were multiple gods. They didn't like the Jews, refused to sacrifice to the emperor, so they spread conspiracy theories about the Jews then. And then after 70 AD, and they tear down the temple, and they purge them from Judea. And ultimately, which one was it? It was Hadrian, I believe, renames Judea to Palestine, which is a play on Philistine, and tells the people that if you live there, you're going to become known as Palestinians and Palestinian Jews. The territory had been Judea. It has been Samaria and Judea. It had been Israel. It had been long tied to them. But Hadrian ultimately purged the Jews, told them you weren't allowed to live there. You were going to die if you did. Allowed Arab tribes to move in and take it over and called it Palestine. But it was always biblically tied to first the land of Canaan. And the Jews went in. They were told to slaughter the pagans, which they mostly did, though not completely. They took it over. They turned it into Israel. Israel ultimately divided into Samaria and Judah. They were purged and sent to Babylon. Some of them left behind. Those who went into exile came back to Judah over time. The Romans took it over. It became Judea, from Judah to Judea, till they were purged in 100-something AD. It became Palestine. It was always the Jewish homeland. And conspiracies were always said about them. And on October 7th, 2023, some of the Palestinian Arabs who had left their homes eons ago told that the Arabs would come in one weekend and kill all the Jews, and they never did. And those Palestinians never came home and have been refugees in the land of Gaza ever since. They decided to put parachutes on their backs with fans and fly across the border to evade detection, and landed at a music festival and began the slaughter of Israeli citizens. And what happened? Around the world, anti-Semites began marching, cheering on the Palestinians, ignorant of history and embracing this profound evil that has reared its head not on the right but on the left. And some world leaders could not be clear about the evil. And it shows you just where we've come in a postmodern society, that so many people can't look at this evil in its eye and call it evil. They have to rationalize it. There is no rationalization for this evil. What happened a year ago today was evil. It was an evil of a long fomenting anti-Semitism and a distortion of history. And the Israelis are on the right side. And if you're not standing with the Israelis in this, you can pretend to be an educated, nuanced person, but what you're really doing is you're finding a way to excuse evil. And we should not do that. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry. Everybody's talking about it. Billions of dollars invested, so buckle up. The problem is AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, Databricks, Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/Erickson, ERICKSON. That's oracle.com/Erickson. Oracle.com/Erickson. Go check them out today. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I got to tell you, we've had a lot of people, they wanted to call in and talk about cloud seeding. I actually know cloud seeding very well because I grew up in Dubai where they were kind of pioneers of it. Take silver particles, spread them into clouds. It's geoengineering is a real thing. What is remarkable, though, are the dimwits out there who extrapolate from one thing to something else. So they've taken cloud seeding to where essentially you see small patches of cloud, you can seed into them silver particles and other particles that then allow condensation to collect and cause rain. Dubai actually did cause some flooding for overseeding clouds a while back. It is a thing. But it's one thing to seed a cloud and another thing to steer a Cat 5 hurricane in a direction of your choosing. Just because one thing is real does not mean the other thing is. But people with very vivid imaginations and worshiping idols have decided that it's all the same thing. There are a lot of people out there who in their minds believe themselves to be geniuses, and actually they're spectacular idiots. I actually am married to a great woman who reminds me every day that I am actually not as smart as I think I am. It keeps me grounded. But my gosh, some people actually need to be told that they're stupid. So here's the thing. If God says people, they thought themselves wise and they were actually foolish, that doesn't just apply to the left. It can apply to lots of people. Keep that in mind. Now, I got to tell you about Swiss America, because one of the things the government actually is doing that's not a conspiracy is trying to track your purchases when you use cash. You think you're spending anonymously, and you're not. It is a secret war on cash that Swiss America has been warning people about, and they want you to get their report for free. It takes less than 15 minutes to read. It can save you on your retirement and finances. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. You get a free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. Now, this includes digital forms of currency. Do not think you spend in Bitcoin, the government can't track you. Oh, yes, they can. Read this report. Again, takes less than 15 minutes. You get it completely free. The Secret War on Cash. 800-289-2646. 800-289-2646. All you do is mention my name, Eric. You can even text the number, 800-289-2646. Text Eric, E-R-I-C-K. They'll send you back a link. You can get the free report. Message and data rates may apply. 800-289-2646. Hello, how are you? Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me this half hour. I got to get into some audio. This is Congressman Mike Turner on Face the Nation.
Do you want the FBI to release the results of its investigations prior to November 5th, as Senator Rubio on Senate Intelligence has called for?
Its investigations into the assassination attempts.
The two assassination attempts at this point, which are not substantiated to have any ties to the state of Iran or to political actors at this point.
Well, actually, then it really can't be said that saying that there have been no substantiated ties doesn't mean that the investigation has concluded that there are no ties. And I want those investigations to come to a conclusion and determine whether or not either of these plots have any nexus or connection to the active plot the administration is saying that Iran is plotting in attempting to kill Donald Trump, which, again, this administration needs to make clear to Iran that would be an act of war and needs to have a very strong response from the administration.
Yes. This administration needs to make it clear to Iran that an assassination attempt on Donald Trump would be an act of war. We know that Iran has been plotting the assassination not just of Donald Trump, but also of Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, and other Americans. We know there have been plots disrupted in this country. Something is happening out there. Y'all, I got to begin with the whole I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You listen to this program, you know it. But I want to read a story to you. This is from October 4th. The headline, 1 dead in FBI-involved shooting in Hernando, Mississippi. One person was shot to death by the Federal Bureau of Investigation while at a hotel in Hernando, Mississippi Friday morning, the agency confirmed. The shooting took place at the Super 8 Hotel. No FBI agents were reported injured in the shooting. Tony Stanton works near the Super 8 Hotel. He says the day started like any other until he noticed FBI special agents at his job site. I knew where some of them were at because I wondered why people were parking in our lot because we're not open, and they said they were waiting on something. I said, okay, not a problem. I mean, what are you going to do, run the feds out of your parking lot? He says shortly after, he and his employees heard a loud commotion and saw agents pouring into the hotel's parking lot. Next thing you know, it seems like they come out of the woodwork. We heard some hollering and then 4 shots. And what sounded like to us, we were just like, everybody get down. We don't know where the shots were coming from. They walked outside. They saw the agents put a man in a tan SUV. The agency released a statement saying the FBI takes all shooting incidents involving our agents or task force members seriously. In accordance with FBI policy, the shooting incident is under review. We have no further details to provide. So you got that? That's the news story. The FBI is looking for someone. They're at a Super 8 hotel in Hernando, Mississippi, which is south of Memphis. Now, let me tell you what the rumor is. It is unconfirmed. Here's the rumor. It was a Russian agent. The FBI had been following him from somewhere in Arkansas through Memphis, headed south on I-59, down towards Jackson, Mississippi. He had stopped in Hernando, Mississippi in this hotel. We don't know who the Russian agent is. We don't know what they were doing. But there's a very credible rumor that this was a Russian agent. Now, let's back up to a completely different story. A couple of months ago, near Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty in North Carolina, a soldier killed a Chechen. The Chechens are territory of Russia that are allied with Vladimir Putin. They're bad dudes. And this was purportedly a Chechen refugee who allegedly, according to the company he worked for, was there with a partner to check utility power lines. The problem, however, is that according to multiple reports, and they've dismissed charges against the soldier, the Chechen was not dressed or identified as a utility worker. There was nothing identifying on him to identify that he worked for the utility company, nor was he dressed like he was there to check power lines. Wasn't dressed like a lineman. He was allegedly a refugee. There are all sorts of questions about that story. Now we've got a purported, rumor has it, Russian agent shot in Hernando, Mississippi. We've now had multiple people arrested for alleged plots to assassinate Donald Trump and others with ties to Iran. You can't tell me there aren't sleeper agents in this country who have crossed the southern border. I simply refuse to believe it. We have thousands of people captured and thousands of people who got away. You cannot tell me that we are capturing people on the terror watch list, but 100% of the people who are getting away aren't on the terror watch list. You can't tell me that. That defies the odds. Listen, I didn't go to math. I didn't go to grad school in math. I'm not a statistician, but I can run the basic numbers in my head. You can't tell me that all of the people that we're catching 100% of the bad guys, and all of the people we're not catching, not a single one of them is a bad guy. In fact, we already know that we've let people into this country who were bad guys, who then we realized were on the terror watch list and had ties to ISIS, and we had to round them up. 8 of them arrested. We've got the former top guys at the CIA and the U.S. Central Command all saying our open border is a massive national security vulnerability, and the Biden administration hasn't done anything. We've got these situations cropping up, and I think Mike Turner is right on Iran. I think Mike Turner is right, and we've been seriously compromised because of the dereliction of duty of this administration. On Iran, I'm kind of surprised Israel hasn't started bombing them today on the anniversary of October 7th. Something's got to give there. That Joe Biden thought it was not a good idea to blow up Iran's nuclear assets. Adam Schiff, by the way, says that what Israel should do is go after the Iranian ballistic missile factories. That they're making their ballistic missiles somewhere. Go after them. Don't go after the nuclear capacity. Go after the ballistic missiles. There's a willful naivete, I think, among the Democrats on the Iranian nuclear proposition. It's a dangerous game for them to play. But we've got serious issues with people coming across our border who are compromising our national security, and we've got serious issues with Iran, and Israel is in a position to do something about it, and this administration wants them to tie a hand behind their back. Why is it always Israel that must tie a hand behind its back? It's a dangerous game they're playing. Y'all, I don't think this administration is very serious. I mean, I think it's actually serious about degrading our capacity to defend ourselves. And I do actually think that is part of Democratic foreign policy. The Democrats, going back to Barack Obama, going back to Jimmy Carter for that matter, had this view of the world that if we were less strong, It would actually stabilize the world because so much of the world is in antagonistic relationship to us. If we were less strong, it would be less provoking. Now, sadly, there are some on the right who have embraced this proposition as well these days and want us to get off the world stage and let China or someone else do it. They say we can't afford it. It's like, for example, the complaining about Lebanon and Ukraine. I agree. It was terribly tone deaf of the administration to brag about the billions they're sending to Ukraine to keep the lights on and the millions they're sending to Lebanon at a time that people in North Carolina are suffering. And at a time that people on the right are saying, you're sending all this money overseas. What about North Carolina? Do we need to rename it Ukraine? Now, for perspective, they're sending $140 million to Lebanon. All of that, is going to go to terrorists, by the way. But they're sending $160 million to Lebanon. For perspective, they're spending $100 million of federal money just on I-40 in North Carolina. That's not the total money spent. They've just allocated $100 million to completely rebuild I-40 in North Carolina, plus all this additional money. We're going to wind up spending way more in North Carolina than in Ukraine or in Lebanon. There are a lot of people who say we can't afford it, and they're right. We can't afford any. We can't afford to deal with North Carolina. Yes, it should come before other things, but we can't afford any of it at this point. But at this point, honestly, we're spending the money on one. We got to spend the money on the other. An America that can't do much is an America that needs to sit it out, and an America that sits it out is an America that hands the world over to Chinese, Iranian, and Russian leadership. So we got to figure out what's going on forward. But I don't think this administration cares. I actually do believe this administration believes that the weaker we are, the better off the world will be. And to those of you on the right who want to pull back from the world stage and become isolationists, you're playing into the Democrats' hands, very much like the conspiracy theorists about steering hurricanes or FEMA. They're playing. Our lack of truthfulness on the right is playing into the hands of people on the left who use that lack of truthfulness to advance their own agenda. It is a dangerous game the liars on the right are playing, a very dangerous game. And honestly, you read this line in the Bible claiming to be wise, they became fools. Don't just say, well, that applies to the left or that applies to people who believe in transgenderism and stuff. No. People on the left and the right. The Bible is politically neutral. There are many people who claim to be wise who will be made fools. And I would suggest to you that in the same way that people on the left think boys can become girls is a foolishness presenting as wisdom, people on the right claiming that hurricanes can be steered by the government is a foolishness pretending to be wisdom. This can affect all sides. And right now we need real grown-ups, not the grown-ups that the Biden administration says they are, but the actual grown-ups who realize this is a dangerous world and America needs to lead. Now, I need to lead you to EdenPureDeals.com right now so that you can get the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, the 3-pack of them. If you go put in discount code ERIC3, ERICK3, you can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You save $200. You get them for less than $200. They take the pollen and the dust out of the air. And they use electrostatic plates, so you don't have to get a filter subscription. But I don't use them for their air filter. They work. It does absolutely work. But here's how I use my Eden Pure Thunderstorm. I can hold it in my hand. It's about the size of a book. I can travel with it. I keep one in a travel bag, and they wipe out odors. So an Eden Pure Thunderstorm generates ozone, which is a gas, which locks onto ions. And odors are ions, essentially a charged particle. And when the ozone touches the charged particle, it erases the charge and it neutralizes the ion. In other words, when your odor, you got, let's say your cat went under the couch and peed, it stinks. You move the furniture around, you shampoo the carpet, the odor ions are still coming through. So the Eden Pure Thunderstorm generates ozone. It gets under there where the cat was and locks onto those ions and destroys them. Smoke odors, litter box odors, dirty diaper odors, it all works. EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. In the last 24 hours, the governor of Florida has demanded 24/7 debris pickup to get it out of the way to minimize projectiles when Milton comes ashore, has demanded landfills and debris collection centers be open 24/7 and ordered the state patrol to rip off a gate at a landfill in Pinellas County, Florida, that was closed overnight, defying his orders, has suspended tolls to allow hurricane evacuation, has issued a government directive that pharmacies allow people to refill prescriptions now that aren't yet in need of prescription refill, and a host of other things in the run-up to a hurricane, because he has dealt with this repeatedly, and Florida knows how to respond to a hurricane. The one that is coming is historically bad, unless something changes. If you are listening to me in Florida right now, you probably want to begin heading north now or shortly after I go off the radio. Even those of you on WDBO, this storm that's coming on shore is going to be bad. Those of you on WFTL, it's going to cut across the peninsula. And remember, the worst side of a hurricane is the right side from the flow, from the direction of travel. So if a hurricane is traveling east, the worst side of the hurricane is going to be on the southeast side. So if it comes in south of Tampa, the areas south of Tampa are going to be brutalized. And we've already had Sanibel Island and all these other beautiful areas down there have already, they've had to be rebuilt once after a hurricane a few years ago. It just is a nonstop fight with hurricanes. Pray for these people down there. Pray for these people. But also note how extraordinarily, boringly competent the DeSantis administration is when it comes to planning for these things. Just doing things that you and I are like, wow, can't believe he did that. And it's just run of the mill. It's like, for example, if you follow along with like pilots of a jumbo jet, they have checklists they go through when they're takeoff and landing. And they go through the checklist. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Check, 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 check. It's what the DeSantis administration is doing. It's here's our checklist of things. We have a massive storm coming. We need to get as much debris out of the way as possible now before it comes. We need to make sure people are evacuated, which means we need to get rid of tolls so that people aren't discouraged from fleeing. We need to make traffic open and maximize it as possible to get them out of the way. We need to make sure people can get prescriptions filled now. We need to do all these things. It's common sense, but it's so extraordinary to see a political leader exercising common sense these days. The same thing, like Georgia, after Helene, still has massive problems. The Augusta, Georgia area, Evans, Georgia, very hard hit by the hurricane. People are still without power over there. And yet we're not having a massive loss of life. We're not having search and rescue, things like that, like in the mountains. One, because the flooding was not as bad, but two, the extraordinarily competent response of Brian Kemp in the state of Georgia. The insurance commissioner, John King, going around briefing local governments on how to navigate FEMA, what to do. The governor going out and checking on things, got local law enforcement, everyone coordinating very well. It's just competent leadership matters. The fact that Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, did not think the federal government needed to mobilize its professional military search and rescue forces for at least 5 days is a pretty damning indictment on Roy Cooper and on the Biden administration that they didn't lead in this stuff. Competent governance makes a difference, and we're seeing that in Georgia and in Florida.